To me, a rat is someone you commit a crime with, and then you go tell on them. I didn't commit a crime. They came after me.
Yeah.
We talk about politics. We talk about how politics has intercepted and interjected, infected the New York City Police Department. We started to receive threats to our families.
Today, we're diving into a cross-country collision of policing cultures as we welcome a distinguished guest who's traversed the mean streets of New York City. Strap in as the NYPD meets the LAPD in an electrifying exchange of experiences, insights, and maybe a few surprises. Joining us is Eric Dim, a name synonymous with both valor and controversy. You see, Eric's journey began in the storied precincts of the New York Police Department back in 2004. He was a rookie with a badge and a mission. But over the years, he ascended the ranks, fearlessly confronting the city's most hardened criminals, earning accolades and respect along the way. But behind the headlines and commendations lies a tale of turbulence. You see, Eric's pursuit of justice came at a cost, making him the focal point of scrutiny and criticism. In his final years as a lieutenant, he found himself in the eye of the storm, weathering more complaints than any other officer in recent memory. We are going to peel back the layers, dive into the heart of the matter, from the adrenaline-fueled chases to the relentless pursuit of the truth. Eric shares his triumphs, his trials, and everything in between. And perhaps most important, we'll explore the mazy complex of internal affairs, where the line between protector and pursued blurs into obscurity. So, without further ado, let's welcome a true enigma of law enforcement, a man who's seen the best and worst of both the badge and the burden it carries. Welcome to Internal Affairs, a police podcast. Let's go. Okay, here we are, Code 6 at scene with Eric Dim. Is that correct?
Outstanding.
That would be NYPD meets LAPD. East Coast meets West Coast. Finally.
You heard me using that terminology, East meets West, and it's nice to find out we have a lot of similarities.
Yeah, we're good. We're definitely somehow someone will make that a title of the episode. We'll figure that out. But look, before we get started and get to know you a little bit, Eric, let's give a shout out to all my sponsors out there. So here we go. Of course, Savage Training Group, law enforcement training company where, look, there's no death by PowerPoint. There certainly isn't any check by the box, or check the box, I should say, type of training. We engage all kinds of different law enforcement training. I happen to be a law enforcement instructor. I teach the internal affairs and officer-involved shooting investigation course. Please look us up. Really, really good stuff that not only you get the education in class, but we want you to take it back to your troops. It's super, super important. Then we have the Titan Group, professional investigation company. Look, if you're looking for complex investigations, whether they're going to be in internal affairs, workplace, or any other sort of really precise, detailed investigations from professionals, you got to look at the Titan Group. And of course, we have Code 4 products. As you can see, we have the coins, you name it, insignias, patches, super top-notch product. You got to look them up, Code 4 products. And last but not least, Code 7 Coffee, man. They came on board. Look, you can attest to this. And in the East Coast and probably anywhere in the United States, what cop doesn't drink coffee? We all do. We love it. I know you're in the Corps. I was in the Navy. I used to drink a lot of coffee. Every profession drinks coffee. You got to look them up. Code 7 Coffee. All the websites will be in the actual channel. So, without further ado, finally, man, I get NYPD in the house.
Outstanding.
Thanks for coming. Look, we met under interesting and awesome circumstances. We are part of this unity of podcasters because you have a podcast, and we'll talk about that. I'm really fascinated with the story you're going to tell me about that. But I've come to realize that this is just not about internal affairs. I understand that's what I called it. It's because we are going to have an IA story. And here's the deal. You can probably attest it, and you can elaborate and chime in. What agency doesn't have an internal affairs story, right? I mean, it's something that we experience, and so I'm going to get right to it and get started.
It's been the dark horse for the NYPD. I could say that.
Yeah, no, I can.
And I tell you what, you know what's quite interesting? I never thought I'd be going on a podcast named Internal Affairs. So, you know what? There's a first for everything. I mean,
let me ask you this though: when you first saw it, what was like your initial thoughts? Like, you see an Internal Affairs podcast, like, what's that all about?
You know, I was quite intrigued because initially I had saw you speak out on different news channels. And I don't know which one it was, but I saw you speak, and I didn't have the correlation at the time until the Internal Affairs podcast. And then, sure enough, I saw you doing the Internal Affairs podcast with Hector Bravo, and I saw the name. I said, I thought maybe it was some type of sarcasm or was mocking the system, and then to find out, you know, this is where you spent your time on the job, and it's quite interesting to. But I do think it's necessary, and I think it's important we get into it. And you know, I that's why I said to you, I spoke to you offline. I said, you know what? It takes guts to have a podcast named Internal Affairs.
Very, very true. I've gotten colleagues who say, "Hey, Marlon, man, you know, that's so bold. Why name it Internal Affairs?" You know what? I'm a true believer. I hear it from my boss when I started teaching. Clarity wins. Simplicity. Let's call it what it is. Let's not come up with some cute name and let's get right to it, because there is a lot to be learned. And I believe, and this is just me because of my experience, there's a big misconception about what the image is, what the stigma is, and what we actually do and what we're trying to accomplish. So we'll get all into that. You mentioned the word important, so I'm going to get right into this because that is the first segment, right? So on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, why don't you tell us, rate the importance of internal affairs in a police department and why?
Well, it's very interesting that you say that. Well, I think the importance obviously is a high level of importance to keep transparency. You talk about clarity. So transparency is something that's quite often spoken about when it comes to policing, especially in the profession, especially at the height of George Floyd and now in this post-George Floyd era. But unfortunately, when it comes to transparency, it's just been about accountability on police officers, viewing and critiquing the police officers. So I use this terminology quite often. And I say that people they critique, they suffer from the Dunning-Kruger effect. So that's why I think it's so important that internal affairs is necessary, that we have a police perspective when it comes to a controversial or a critical incident or some type of level of corruption.
The Dunning-Kruger effect is my first question. Can you elaborate a little bit about that? Because I don't think that many of us know here in the West Coast what it is.
I use that quite often. So the Dunning-Kruger effect, two professors back in the 90s, they did a study that the least you know about a subject, the more you think you could do it. And that's one thing that this country is suffering from right now, especially with keyboard warriors and social media. Policing is the easiest profession to attack and be critical of it because it's at your disposal, and everyone loves to critique policing. And everyone, in many cases, people have an ideology of how they can handle policing in a different manner. But I always give this analogy. We watch Tom Brady or other football stars or any athletes. We watch a game, and you have the guy who's out of shape sitting on the couch watching, saying, "Oh, why didn't he throw the pass this way or that?" Well, it's easy to say from your couch, but what happens when you're in the game? It's quite different.
That's first time hearing that. That's like super spot on, because you're right. Not just in law enforcement, which, by the way, it is easy to pick on. You know, I'm sure, you know, there's a lot of newsworthy incidents where we can just say, well, you know, they could have done this different. And,
you got a year, because we could go all day.
Yeah, we can go all day. In fact, you know, there's a lot of keyboard warriors. You know, we've been labeled. I think at one of my episodes, I was labeled a cubicle queen. Me and my guest, and I want to respond so bad. Probably only to say and be sarcastic and say, you know what, hey, it's a great job when we're applying. You know, let me know when you want to apply.
Well, that's a great thing about being a cop or a former cop. I spent time in the military. You have thick skin, and you just kind of laugh everything off.
Yeah, no, totally. The humor is one of the best elements in law enforcement, and I say that to bring out the point that we're so quick to judge, but we just don't really know exactly what it is to walk in that person's shoes. So I couldn't agree with you more. In terms of, so tell me, are we looking at a 10? You know.
Well, You're asking how important it is.
Correct.
We're not asking how it's utilized.
Right.
On
In your lens.
And
in your lens and your experience.
On importance level, I think it's a 10. Absolutely.
Yeah.
How it's utilized and actually how it's implemented and administered is quite different when it comes to the New York City Police Department. That's why I'm curious to hear your perspective, because I believe there's some similarities between the NYPD and LAPD. But based on the quick conversation that we've had, I think there's some differences also that we could definitely discover when it comes to this.
Absolutely, and definitely something that I always hear, and you said it best, and I even wrote it down, transparency. My beef with transparency is, you know what, it's we're halfway there. We have an internal affairs podcast. We have your podcast. We have a lot of these police podcasts. You want transparency? There you have it. Because, you know, I'm a big I'm okay with scrutinizing my beloved LAPD and many other big agencies, even NYPD, where when we start talking about transparency, what an officer goes through, let's just even pick a critical incident, an OIS for that matter. We talk about how we can scrutinize their actions, but you really don't know what the officer actually goes through when they pull the trigger. So I appreciate that. Look, let me ask you this. What is one thing that you think all IA investigators should know or they should do? Like, if you had a stage full of all these new sergeants, because they're sergeants who do the investigations, what would you like them to know about doing this type of job?
I'm so glad that you asked this. Well, I think in order to be an investigator in internal affairs, and that's any department in the entire country, you have to have had enforcement experience yourself. I think in order to critique and actually give a perspective, especially when it comes to use of force cases, you would have had to be in the game yourself. Just as I said before, the Dunning-Kruger effect, you can't be a couch observer. You actually have to be a player in the game before you can actually make an assessment yourself. So I think absolutely, I would expect all investigators to have a minimum of 3 years in an enforcement unit. That would be a requirement. If I was police commissioner tomorrow, absolutely, that would be a requirement.
And if I was your colleague in that commission, I would add and say, you know what? Why don't we pick someone who actually has gone through an IA?
That would be great.
A harsh one? How about one where we just drag them through the entire mud, and just?
Well, I'd be the right man for the job.
We'll get into that, and then only to say that, you know what? I think we got it wrong. He's been exonerated. I would think that type of character and that trait, you're going to know. Like I always say, my mantra is no stone goes unturned. Don't be lazy. Do your job and follow every single lead. Turn that stone so that, you know what, maybe we got it wrong. We need to exonerate Eric. I mean, what do you think?
Well, that would be the second important. Actually, you know, let me circle back. Just say it might even be the most important thing. And I always say, in order for an organization to thrive, or if an organization crumbles, it's based on leadership. So it's so important that we have the best leadership in internal affairs in order for it to thrive. Absolutely. And that alleviates the inadequacies and the inept work that you're talking about. When we have inadequacies, just as you're speaking about, the laziness and competence, that falls on leadership. Absolutely. Yeah. It's the leadership's job to enforce, make sure that their people are driven and doing the proper investigations.
I'm going to throw you a softball out there because I know I know who you are. I got to know you a little bit. Do you feel sometimes as an IA investigator or the upper echelon and these levels of review, is it personal, biased, maybe?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Especially right now. So I can't account for LAPD, but in the New York City Police Department, the problem right now is there's numerous layers that a police officer faces. Mm-hmm. So it's not just internal affairs. You have also what's called the Civilian Complaint Review Board, which is an independent watchdog. And also, in addition to that, you have all the legislation that's been enacted by the New York City Council. So right now, a cop in New York City, which I'm sure it mirrors other cities, probably LAPD has some similarities. When you're involved in a controversial, critical incident, you have to potentially face financial liability, emotional liability, physical liability, and at this point, it's come to potential incarceration. So it's a scary time to be a cop, especially in New York City. But as I know now from the army that we're building, this network of police officers who all become YouTubers, we're all experiencing many similarities when it comes to this. It's infected the entire country.
Yes. CCRB, rather say that instead of the Civil Commission Review Board.
Civilian Complaint Review Board.
Civilian Complaint Review Board, aka CCRB.
Yes.
In your experience, well, let me back up. In general, is it good and fair?
Well, that's a good question, right? So that's a two-part question. Let me start with fair.
Yes.
It's absolutely not fair. The organization itself is completely biased and has a disdain for police. How do I know this? I was attacked by an overzealous Civilian Complaint Review Board, which changed the trajectory of my career, which also affects public safety. But even more than that, in my retirement, it's been my crusade to combat the Civilian Complaint Review Board. In addition to that, what we have is called the discipline matrix for the New York City Police Department, how they weaponize discipline against police officers. But the Civilian Complaint Review Board itself, myself and my partner on our podcast, we attend a virtual hearing on a monthly basis that is conducted by the Civilian Complaint Review Board. And we actually testify. We give testimony. And what we hear there from the Civilian Complaint Review Board investigators, the chair, those that are in charge of it, is just a complete disdain for police. They even at some point, they testified that when they look at a case, when they look at something controversial, they're not taking the totality of circumstances for the police officer's perception, only for the emotions felt by the complainant. That's completely biased and based on emotion.
Tell me a little bit about CCRB. When was it established?
So it was established at some time in the 70s. But what changed was in 1993, I believe. It's 1992 or 93.
So it's been around.
It's been a long time, right? But at that time, it was part of the police department. But in 1993, former Mayor David Dinkins at the time, he changed the Civilian Complaint Review Board to be its own independent watchdog. And that's where things started to change. But over the years, even myself, in the early years of the police department, it was much more fair. And it wasn't something to fear. But in 2018, when the legislation started to change and Civilian Complaint Review Board was awarded subpoena power, and even now, they have the ability to open up a case without a complainant. They can self-initiate cases based on body cam footage, based on footage at a store or a third-party complainant.
Even though I did their entire investigation, they exonerated you, it can go to CCRB and they can change their mind or do something.
I'm a prime study case, right? So I've been coined as the most complained cop for the NYPD, most complaints in NYPD history. So here's the irony to it. In 2018, at the height of the change of legislation that really impacted my career along with other careers at the police department and impacted public safety, you could see that Civilian Complaint Review Board got more subpoena power and the legislation started to change and also the personnel started to change. There's a complete disdain for police. Up to that point, you could see that my career was nothing out of the ordinary. I was doing the same type of work that I was doing at the end of my career, special operations. The complaints that I had were not out of control. But in 2018 to June 4th, 2020, my last complaint as a result of the riots and George Floyd, I got 75% of my complaints. And they all came from the most volatile, violent perpetrators in the entire city. At the same time, simultaneously, I was cleared by Internal Affairs for all these cases. I got numerous awards for the community, including Leader of the Finest, Lieutenant of the Year, a proclamation from the borough president. So at the same time, I'm getting awards. I'm getting the highest evaluations you could get from the police department, and the Civilian Complaint Review Board is tearing down my record, trying to get me terminated.
Okay, let me...
It's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, let me absorb all that only to ask you this question. Did anyone in your levels of review, your leadership, know that we're making Lieutenant Dim out to be this really, really awesome cop? I mean, he's doing great work out there, you know, in protecting and serving the community. But at the same time, we're scrutinizing him by CCRB. Is that something that you knew, or is that something that they just didn't care about? Or
well, that's part of my crusade in retirement, and it's not to fight for vengeance. I'm not here to show any hate, but I'm here to expose the system itself. The progressive politics has penetrated the New York City Police Department along with other police departments in the country. It's just a complete infection. But in order for this to grow, we have to have people in higher positions that lack moral principle, and they lack integrity. And that's who's been put into these positions for this infection to grow in these police departments. So I was promoted to the Special Operations Lieutenant, which is Lieutenant Special Assignment. So as a lieutenant, I was promoted to Lieutenant Special Assignment, which is a discretionary promotion for leading the charge and getting illegal firearms doing special operations while the Civilian Complaint Review Board was tearing down my record. The police commissioner, along with the other upper echelon of the police department, had the ability to have these cases dismissed. They knew I was being attacked by this overzealous Civilian Complaint Review Board, but they were unwilling to fight for me, to support me. And I believe that they were in bed with the unions. Along with the union, they were allowing me to become a casualty.
Do you feel like you were singled out, or do you know or have any knowledge of this being, I suppose it's either a culture or a practice? Meaning, is there anyone else that you're aware of in your department that at the same time was getting all these accolades, but at the same time they're being scrutinized by CCRB?
Yes. There were others also. My case happened to be the most egregious. And there's some contributing factors and elements to this, if I could just give you a background.
Yeah, please.
So I was a special operations lieutenant in Police Service Area 7. That's a precinct in the South Bronx. The South Bronx is 99% black and brown community. Okay? So as a white male, as a special operations lieutenant, and I was also always at the forefront with my units. I was out there. I always set the example. I led from the front. I was easily exposed. I was locking up the most volatile perpetrators. While the legislation was changed, it became a criminal-first society. So my career was attacked, and this is the opportunity that the criminals have. They're coached by their attorneys. They're coached by this by the defense to make civilian complaints, so that I myself and my units would ease up on these criminals that are out there. That also coincides with this DEI movement. And we have the numbers to show that the New York City Police Department was the most diverse police department. And up to this point where they had this DEI push post-George Floyd, it's not diverse anymore. It's actually top-heavy with black and brown. It's 54% of the majority of the police department is now black and Hispanic. So there's no more diversity. Now we're pushing to just have black and brown. And I have no problem with any walks of life on the police department, but it should be organic and the most suitable to wear those uniforms. But I was definitely at the forefront being attacked for being an alpha white male.
Do you feel that being an alpha white male in, I suppose, your precinct, or I suppose I could say NYPD, was a difficult job to do?
Well, I had a great relationship with the community. So I worked in the South Bronx. It's the poorest congressional district in the country. And with that being said, I had a great relationship with the people in the community. I would say there's even less than 10% of criminals even in that area, and that's one of the most volatile neighborhoods in the entire country. But that wasn't my world. The world that I dealt with was the criminals. The good people, I don't interact with them. Maybe at a community meeting with an award. But my world was a small world just dealing with the criminals. Every day I did crime analysis. I studied the trends. I went out there with my team with a plan to arrest those perpetrators, to make a better life for these people that live there. Yeah. Because the reality is, even in the poorest congressional district of the country, the majority of the people there, they were good people. They want societal norms. They want a good life. But that's not what the progressives are telling everyone. They're giving them a complete spin on this. It's a complete lie.
Right. And let me elaborate a little bit more. Did you, in your opinion, is being an alpha white male in this capacity, this word, harder to function than an alpha male black or an alpha male Hispanic or any other race?
In what sense? What do you?
Well, if there is
there's race play factor,
right? I mean, if there's bias in race.
So on the, I would say.
I guess what I'm trying to say is, let's just say you and I. I'll make it like this. You and I are both lieutenants.
Okay.
And we're in this unit. Are you being more scrutinized because you're a male white and I'm a male Hispanic?
Great question. As far as the community goes, absolutely not. The community's just happy that the police are doing their job.
Right. And if I may interject, I'm talking about with the criminals.
With the criminals?
Yes.
Honestly, no.
Okay.
No. The actual attack for being an alpha white male was from the Civilian Complaint Review Board.
Got it. Yeah. It's different. There's different dynamics here. And I say that because I just met a male black officer in Georgia, for example, the state of Georgia. Not in Atlanta, just in the outskirts in a small agency. He claims that being a male white officer, to go into an entire neighborhood of just predominant black, it's a really tough job to do. And I guess what he was trying to allude the fact that if it wasn't a male white and he was Hispanic or maybe black, it wouldn't be as hard, or they wouldn't be as scrutinized every single movement of the, you know, all the functions he does as a police officer.
Well, I always say police is not a one size fits all, right?
Right.
Every community has policing has to be addressed in a different manner. So working in New York City, it's a metropolis. It's extremely diverse, right? However, the conglomerate of the area I worked in was 99% black and brown, but they are accustomed to seeing white police officers, and the relationship was good. And actually, I actually saw the reverse. Sometimes I would see, I saw it actually more difficult for the black officers and the Hispanic officers because they were referred to as sellouts, and they were getting more opposition from people in the community saying, "Hey, you're one of us."
Yeah.
And what happened was, it started to become it wasn't a racial issue of white and black.
Right.
It was blue and black.
100%. You are, you know, this is the connection with LAPD. I can tell you partners and who work South LA, who's, you know, now it's predominantly Hispanic, but at the time back in the 90s and even in the 80s where it was predominantly black, yes, you are an Uncle Tom. You are a sellout.
Right.
You know, and you're right, it becomes more of a blue, black issue than it does any other racial tensions. Interesting to say that because the colleague that I just met him last weekend, brought, you know, the light bulb kind of hit where I never thought of a male white officer going into, you know, here in Watts or the projects here in South Los Angeles, where maybe it's a little more difficult for me to do my job than maybe you, Marlon, or, you know, someone else of a different race.
Right.
And that's all I'm pointing out. And I just kind of wanted to get, you know, a little bit of the dynamics that happens in New York.
I like to give a case in point, right? So Tyree Nichols, right? That was the incident that happened in Tennessee with five black police officers, right? I think that was a great case in point. So I myself and my co-host on, his name is John McCary, we actually both wrote articles. It's in a magazine called The Manhattan in New York City. We wrote articles about the incident, the events that led to the death of Tyree Nichols. And there was a racial undertone that was put out when it came to that particular incident. But yet it was five black police officers. And Tyree Nichols, unfortunately, met his demise. But he was black. But really what it came down to was blue and black.
Yeah.
And really what came down to that was a terrible incident. It was actually fault on the police officers. But where was the fault on? It was fault on the leadership. Exactly what I've been talking about. It was these DEI hires that had no business doing police work.
Yeah. And, you know, all I would add to that is, you know what, I am real big on what they call organizational culture, is what I call cop culture. And you know what? That would always dictate what you don't do and what you do. And often the case is the things that you don't do.
Right.
You know, that's just the way it works. And you know what? I thank you for sharing all that. Let's move to a trip down memory lane, man, because all I know thus far is you were in the academy in January 2004, and I know that you called it quits in 2018. However,
22.
I'm sorry, 2022.
September.
There you go. It's very recent. I like that.
Yeah.
Did at some point you become a sergeant or no?
Actually, I retired as a lieutenant special assignment.
Right, but as you made it to lieutenant, does NYPD?
That's actually the middle, right? It's
did you make sergeant or
cop
no?
to sergeant? Yeah.
Okay.
Sergeant lieutenant.
So you made sergeant. When did you promote to sergeant?
February 2009.
There you go. February 2009. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Got promoted to sergeant. And tell them what that's like. Because, look, I always say this. Sergeant's like one of the, well, it is. Me personally, it's the best rank in a police organization. I say that because you have so much influence and impact on your subordinates and the officers. And you're like the middle person from getting all the orders from the top. So what's your thoughts?
I got a great story. So my career has always been a roller coaster and ups and downs. But I always I've always been that way. I have thick skin. I just kind of absorb everything. I don't let anything bother me. So the reason why I got promoted in February 2009, because in January 2009, I got called in to get promoted. So I'm not sure how it works for LAPD. But back then, you would get called to get promoted, but you would go to what's called a basic module officer course. It was a month long, and you went to this course to learn about leadership, a little bit, seminars.
Yeah, we call that supervisor school.
Right. Nonsense. Total. Can I say
It's
bullshit?
a month.
Bullshit.
Yes, yeah, it's a month of your life that you just can't take back.
Total nonsense. But you sit there for a month, and well, at least it's supposed to be a month, and at the end they promote you. So of course, this is the luck I've always had in the police department. So halfway through this class, we had the director of management and budget came in and said, "Listen, I'm sorry, due to budget cuts, we can't promote you." So I don't know if I can say this, but a lot of guys gave the FUs, and they burned the bridges. So we had to go. We finished out the class for the month. We had to go back to our old precincts as a cop, even though we finished the course, and wait till they decide that they have the budget to promote us. Man, did I get clowned on. We went back to the precinct, and one of the sergeants says, you're going to do the desk, right? So he gives me his shield, right? He goes upstairs to sleep. I put on his shield, and they made a name tape. You're supposed to have your name for the NYPD. It said almost sergeant, and they put me on the desk, and then they glued corporal chevrons to my locker. I got abused for the whole month. But I said, thank God I didn't burn the bridges, Then finally a month later, they called, like, all right, we can promote you. But I got abused.
Sergeant. Oh, my God.
I got abused. That's the times I miss, actually. You always do. Like, me and my buddy John, right? My co-host.
Yes.
On the podcast. That's the stuff we always talk about. Especially doing special operations. It was such a brotherhood.
Yeah.
You knew, like, if you had a funny shirt or you had a bad haircut, it was your day.
Yes.
You get abused today. You just had to take it.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that, man. You bring me back memories. That just, the best of times. Camaraderie is...
Yeah. So I became a sergeant. I was only in uniform a very short time. I was blessed. Okay. They recognized my skills. I was very good at getting guns. So I became the anti-crime sergeant. Back then, we were in plain clothes. I had a team of 6 cops. Mm-hmm. And I worked at the Lower East Side of Manhattan, worked in housing again, in an area called Police Service Area 4. And we went out. We studied the crime analysis, the trends, and we got people with illegal firearms. Nice. And it was great. That was my... as a young sergeant, I had guys on my team with 19 years on the job, some at 17, and I was like, wow, I'm their boss, And it was really a humbling experience.
Wow. Awesome. Lieutenant, congratulations. When did we make lieutenant?
January. I guess January is my month.
Yeah, look at you.
January 2015.
Okay. Did you go through a month course and then they said no because of budget reasons? And
this time I actually got promoted.
Did you have a badge for almost lieutenant? That's what I need to know.
Not this time. This time I actually went right to the precinct as a lieutenant. So
we talked about it. You had a lot of expertise and experience with the gun unit and violent crimes.
Yeah, I ran, like I said, I was for the NYPD. It's called anti-crime. I was the anti-crime sergeant for 6 years. That's a long time, every day grinding in plain clothes. So immediately, I was requested to go to Police Service Area 7 from 4. So 4 was on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, 7 was in the South Bronx, and they held a spot for me. And immediately on day 1, I was assigned as a Special Operations Lieutenant. Same thing in plain clothes, but now as in the position of lieutenant. So now I didn't just have one team; I supervised all the teams.
Right. What's the one thing you can take away from this particular assignment?
Oh,
that you can think of.
I tell you, I was blessed to work with the best men and women that the NYPD had to offer. It was such a brotherhood. I got to teach them, to mentor them, and watch some of these boys become men, some of these girls become women, and they all had the skills to make a fantastic team. And what I understood by that is that you can't expect every person on your team to have all the attributes. You have to put them together, almost like Voltron. Each one forms the body, and I form the head, and you form a team. And I was blessed to work with the best men and women. I really was.
How about your upper management? Captain was good. Did you have good bosses?
I had a mix.
Okay.
Some were great, and some were just okay. And for me, and this is where I found I had differences with other police officers, sergeants, and lieutenants I worked with. They mistook niceness for goodness, and they would like the new bosses that came in smiling, "Hey, how you doing?" And I said I didn't care about that. I don't care if that guy ever says hello to me. I want to know that he's good, that he stands up for us when we're in a pickle, and that man has the fortitude to stand up for us. That's the leader I want. What do I care if he smiles at me and brings me a donut? I could buy my own donut, my own coffee. I don't care if he smiles at me. I need to know that he's going to support us when we're in a pickle.
Yeah.
And that's when the guys, that's real leadership.
Well, good. Hey, man, Eric, thanks for sharing all that. Look, it is an internal affairs podcast. I am intrigued with with your IA story. I do know that you started your podcast, and I'll front load it for you. You made a complaint against the New York Police Department for, I suppose, the content of your podcast. And I'll leave the floor up to you and tell me how this all evolved and what's going on, and kind of fill us in on this IA you got going on.
So it's quite interesting. Anti-crime started 6 years. I was a very active cop. I was a special operations lieutenant for 8 years. I never made a complaint my entire career. I never thought I would ever make a complaint to Internal Affairs. And I'm not hiding from it. I'm proud to make this complaint. I have no problem with it. If anybody has an issue with it, I mean, I've been attacked on social media with pictures of rats telling me I'm a rat. And I say to all the people out there that have put that out there, to me, a rat is someone you commit a crime with, and then you go tell on them. I didn't commit a crime. They came after me.
Yeah, no, totally.
So John McCary and I, we're both retired lieutenants. And we do a podcast together. It's called New York's Finest Retired Unfiltered Podcast. And we discuss an array of topics. The main focus has been obviously the NYPD. That's our forte. We talk about policing, our perspective. We give critical opinion. It's based on opinion. We talk about politics. We talk about how politics has intercepted and interjected, infected the New York City Police Department. But what do we also do? Because I'm a firm believer that leadership is so important for an organization to thrive or crumble. We are critical of the upper echelon of the police department. So we were attacked on social media by a unit called the CRT, the Community Response Team. These guys they're doing anti-crime work, pretty similar to what I used to do, except I did in plainclothes. Plainclothes was disbanded. So they're wearing this quasi type of uniform, different color pants, but they're basically doing the same type of work. So we've been very critical, and John and I had spoke out on social media trying to advise these guys to avoid using the vehicle pursuits and chases as a tactic. And the reason why in New York City, even when we were supported, it was always a tactic that was kind of frowned upon. Right, because the totality of circumstances, especially in New York City, the metropolis, it's so crowded. Chances are you're putting a 5-year-old kid at risk more than the adversary that you have.
Totally.
It's only something that should be taken in extreme circumstances. Yeah. So we got a lot of backlash for that. We got a lot of heat, and we started to get attacked on social media by this unit. And this unit was, telling us our wives are fat, this and that, and challenging us to come to a bar to have a fight, things like that. Now, John and I were pretty tolerable of it. We kind of laughed it off. We didn't care. There was a lot of libel involved, harassment. It was basically a smear campaign, and we're trying to shut down our podcast. And also, they alluded to the fact that they were checking the database to find out and get information about us. But again, we were tolerable. We weren't looking to seek a complaint. At the same time this is happening, which is every reason to believe, credible information, based on our observation and the evidence that we have, that this was ordered by the upper echelon of the police department. Because at the same time, the Deputy Commissioner of Operations is giving a speech at a gala, at a dinner. And at that speech, he said there's a few retired lieutenants, and we know the only retired lieutenant speaking out is myself and John and Sal Greco, who's a friend of ours, who are out of state. We're out of state.
Not hard to figure that out.
Basically on the smear campaign, said we had nothing to offer to contribute when we were on the job. And now we have a master plan how to do crime. And they refer to themselves as the Dream Team. So at the same time he's giving us the speech, we are getting attacked by their unit on social media. We were very tolerable. At the same time, we were also getting attacked now on a daily basis. It was almost like an unhealthy obsession. There was a moniker on Instagram referred to as All Cops Are Woke. It's a fake moniker, attacking myself and John. We were very tolerable of that. We knew it was an active member of the service by the verbiage that they were using. But at some point, we started to receive death threats to our families, which included threats to our kids. We received a picture of a map showing a direction to Florida, coincided with a picture of duct tape and zip ties, a picture of someone holding two girls, a picture of someone holding a little boy, and in reference to telling us that I hope your families have a long life. So at that point, we made the determination that this cop is unhinged. This person doesn't deserve to be a cop. So anyone in New York City, because I'm going to make sure they watch this, I'm telling you right now, if you have a problem with me making that complaint, you can come tell me to my face. Yeah. I'm proud to make that complaint, because when you start to attack families, you cross the line. And that person does not deserve to be a cop. You're unhinged. You shouldn't be out there with a gun or a badge.
Yeah, egos, sometimes get the best of us, and I don't quite understand it. You're being critical of some really important type of police functions. I mean, the one time that I was in New York, and of course we always see New York, yes, it's very crowded. I think at one point they said that, you can quote me if I'm wrong, but Broadway sees over 80,000 people a day or something like that, or 8,000. I think it's
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I mean, like the traffic. So when you're out there doing pro-police work, like you were mentioning, and you have a situation where you might go into foot pursuit, or you might go into pursuit in your vehicle, you know what? Rules of the road and the dangers. So, you have to make a decision, which one outweighs the other. Risk versus reward, right?
Absolutely.
Is the juice worth the squeeze?
What movie was that from?
Yeah.
That's a great line.
Meaning, okay, what do we got here? Are we talking about a stolen vehicle that's a property crime that, I don't know, we got the license plate and we worked this guy up? I'm sure we can figure out another method of capturing and apprehending this particular suspect. And no, we have to chase and run. So, you know what? I applaud you for being that critical, because at the end of the day, it's about the community. It's about the experience. You're not speaking. You're not a cubicle queen like I was labeled. But,
this goes even further. If you want more,
no, totally. And I picked up on that only to say that. Sometimes egos get the best of us, and you know what? They'll take it to the extreme to threaten everything about you, when in reality it should never even be like that. I mean, come on, we're all on the same team here.
Absolutely. Well, even further. So we have the podcast, John McCary and I.
Yeah.
But we also have a close friend of ours. His name is Sal Greco.
Mm-hmm.
Sal Greco was wrongfully terminated by the New York City Police Department because of his friendship with Roger Stone. Who's Roger Stone in alliance with? Donald Trump.
Right.
Just to show you the progressive politics that have penetrated the New York City Police Department.
Right. Yeah. No. Politics. Nothing good ever comes out of politics.
Sal was wrongfully terminated, and to Sal's credit, he uncovered that the upper echelon of the police department, it's a known hangout, including the mayor, along with Letitia James, the Attorney General, along with numerous NYPD fraternal organizations, precinct functions at a particular restaurant called Concertitos in the Bronx. But what's interesting is the owner is actually the brother to the police commissioner, but just on paper for the state liquor authority. But the de facto, the actual real owner is this guy, Jimmy Rodriguez. Now, I have no issues with Jimmy Rodriguez, but the issue is hypocrisy, because Jimmy Rodriguez is known to be an associate of the mob. There was unsolved murders that have surrounded conversation in restaurants that he's had. The restaurants that he's had were referred to as cocaine buffets, and the police department was hanging out at this place. And meanwhile, Sal Greco was wrongfully terminated for his association to a supposed known criminal who Roger Stone was pardoned. Yeah. So we had a podcast with Sal, and we had a roundtable where we exposed this, and an article came out at the same time in the New York Post about the issue with the New York City Police Department there.
Okay. So you guys aren't alone on this.
So now, but really the article was about a structure that they had that was really a fire hazard. They didn't have their permit.
Got it.
And the police department was ignoring it. Why? Because they hang out there, obviously.
Uh-huh.
But what's quite interesting, so Jimmy Rodriguez doesn't know the podcast. He doesn't watch the podcast. He doesn't know myself or John, but it's obvious the police department spoke to him, because at the same time this article came out, this mobster reaches out to John McCary, my partner, on Instagram and threatens him, says, we're going to meet soon. And then along with that All Cops Are Woke, that fake moniker I told you about, said, put out on Instagram, oh, you mess with my bosses, now my CEOs are going to come after you. So this was all packaged together, part of our complaint.
Wow. So you leave in 2022 and the wrath of fire by opening up this door.
The truth is a scary thing.
No, sometimes it is. You know what? It's a walk in a pathway that you know what, we will remain strong and keep going, man. I'm glad we met.
Absolutely.
And thank you for sharing that story. And you're right. We can sit here and talk more about all this really tough times, because we are talking about families. It's personal, egos are in the way, self-serving, et cetera, et cetera. let's move on to the next segment, if you will, for the sake of time, because you and I can talk forever. Give me something that you experienced that was the worst in your career, and you can share and be a little precise about it. What do you think that was?
What would you say? Politics or an arrest?
I would say probably an incident. What's the worst incident that you experienced that you can think of? Something that really stood out. I mean, you were on the job for 18 years. There's got to be something that just...
Sure. Well, I'd say it was the worst and best incident at the same time.
Okay.
Just to see bravery in children, and also how deviant humanity could be. So in 2018, simultaneously while I'm getting attacked by a civilian complaint review board, I received a proclamation for the borough president. So I was actually, one day was November 1st of 2018, and I was actually walking into work. And this particular day, I think I went to the gym or something like that. So I didn't have my firearm on. I just had a pair of jeans and a T-shirt. And I'm walking to the back of the precinct. I'll never forget. My commanding officer at the time, he came out running. He threw me the keys. He says, "We got to go, go, go." I wasn't going to say anything. I didn't tell him I have no gun. I didn't have any equipment. All right, let's go. He says, "Go, go, go. We got to go to this building on Webster Avenue in the projects. Let's go." He says, "A kid is shot." Oh, so we get there. We run upstairs. We get to the 6th floor. We get to 6th floor, and it's just a bloody mess. And any cop knows when you see that red, when it's fire engine red, you already know, someone's met their demise.
Yes.
So this man is laying in the stairs. He's gone already. Mm-hmm. There's so much blood. But at the same token, I see a little boy with two young police officers who are trying to stop the blood. The blood is profusely coming from his arm. Mm-hmm. This little boy was So I went over and I assisted the police officers. I took my belt off, and the best I could apply it, what I learned in the Marine Corps, is I tried to make a makeshift tourniquet out of my trouser belt and put it on his arm. And then other police officers came and grabbed him, assisted me, got him out of there, got him to the hospital. They drove him real quick. And thank God his life was saved. But I was just so impressed on how strong, how brave this kid was. He was 5 years old. He was barely crying. And it was amazing. And so, it was just another humbling experience. And I said, this is why we do what we do. Yeah. Because it's moments like this. So sure enough, this poor kid, he was with his father. From what the information that we got, a rival drug dealer fired the father and the kid also. Wow. I don't think that the rival drug dealer had the intentions of the kid, mm-hmm. but the kid was with him. It was just it really was a mess. But just to see how evil people can be, and at the same time just to see the bravery on this kid, I said, it was moments like that this is why we do this job. Yeah, that was a proud moment that day.
Thank you for sharing that, Eric. I appreciate that. Hey, look, you know what? I know we're about to wrap it up and conclude, but you know what? I'm gonna leave the floor up to you. Any advice? Well, before we give the advice, I know you mentioned the podcast. Where can we find you? And just kind of keep people apprised about what's going on.
Sure. So I'm the co-host of New York's finest retired and unfiltered podcast. You can find it on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes. It's all over the different platforms, audio, visual. Also, really, most of the reach that my partner and I on the podcast have gotten is on social media. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at Most Complained Cop. You could also see on a daily basis we put out satirical memes about the police department. I mean, we put out one today. It was a spoof on Seinfeld, and it was one of the leaders of the police department giving a speech that was very talking about himself, and my partner did a great job. He made this meme about it. So that's what we do. And those memes are meant to be comical, but it's messaging in those memes to show how the leadership has really sold out the members of the police department. They're not getting the support they need. I support the rank and file like there's no tomorrow, but I don't support a failed leadership.
Spot on, man. That's like a drop mic, and I should say a mic drop, and I appreciate that. Parting words, man. Look, I'll leave the floor up to you. Any advice you can give a young officer in NYPD or anywhere in the nation that's doing this type of work, this career, this lifestyle, a young sergeant, someone's trying to make lieutenant, anyone, what kind of advice would you give them, man?
I'm so glad that you said that. So I'm a firm believer that readers are leaders. So I think that my best advice is that let me just say how I was able to combat all the civilian complaints that I had received from these adversaries that I arrested was by knowledge. So I always use this. I say competence brings confidence. So you have to constantly read case law. Case law, I don't care where you work in this country, case law is the key element to being an effective police officer. We all have handbooks and guides to the administrative policy, but to actually understand law and actually understand what it is to be a cop, you have to understand U.S. Supreme Court case law. That is your job ultimately, and that coincides with anywhere you work in the entire country. I will say this: I think the key to an effective societal norm is doing intrusive police work. But right now, if you do intrusive police work, you really put yourself in harm's way. Financial liability, civil liability. Again, I say the most powerful thing that you could do right now is to read. You cannot just go through the motions. You have to read. You have to know your handbook for your police department. You have to know the policy. You cannot say, I am not a sergeant or in a leadership position. You have to be a leader amongst yourself and a leader amongst your peers. You have to read constantly. You have to be the most competent person in the room at all times. Police officers do not walk into a room, they enter a room. That's what makes us special.
Wow. Hey, man, thank you. Look, big question. New York Jets or the New York Giants?
Giants all the way.
Okay. Now, here's my follow-up question to that. Where are they located?
In New Jersey.
Isn't it a little strange?
All right, so both of them are.
Well, let me ask, do you think that's strange?
Absolutely.
You're not left alone
But
because
New
the San Francisco 49ers, for all you 49ers, this stadium is in Santa Clara, for crying out loud. Dude, it's like an hour. You can quote me on this. I know it's more than an hour on the freeway. It's far. It's not even in San Francisco. Just,
Oh, you're right about that. I always said the same thing. Like, can't we just put this in New York somehow? But
Yankees all the way.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Especially, I worked in the South Bronx. The Yankee Stadium is right there.
Yes, I love.
It was earshot
once. It was a phenomenal experience for me going to Yankee Stadium. Eric, man, thank you so much for showing up, man. I'm glad we were able to connect with all these podcasters where we're trying to have a unity together, and we're just going to keep moving forward and pushing this agenda where we feel leadership fails at times. We need to be treated better when we go through a major IA, and you know what? We should just get better at policing, period, in any aspect.
Can I add one more thing?
Please.
I want to honor the life, and I say this because my partner and I on the podcast, we say that unfortunately police officers are only honored in death. But I want to honor the life of all the men and women that are doing the job right now, and I want to honor Officer Jonathan Diller, who was posthumously promoted to detective, who was recently murdered in New York City for doing his job. Again, I want to honor his life and to talk about leadership. Please, if you could tune in, watch. Mayor Eric Adams was giving a speech, and he couldn't even remember his name. He said, Jonathan, he could not remember his name in less than 2 weeks. We hear terms, never forget. People have short-term memories. Yeah. Short-term memories. Couldn't even say his name.
Yeah.
Well, he's a complete moron, so.
Yeah. And then we can go on and on and on and on.
But listen, thank you so much for having me, and I hope, that we can be, like a consigliere to the police officers that are out there right now. If anyone needs any advice or need help, reach out to us, www.thefinanceunfiltered.com. Reach out to you. We don't know everything, but I could always pass on my anecdotal experience.
Amen to that. And I can echo that as well. Hey, thank you. Like always, you know what? Be safe out there, and don't forget to go Code 6. Thank you.